Hugh Carroll is my name. Thanks for joining us for this demonstration. Firstly, just to kick off, give you a sense of what we're going to be covering in the presentation in this particular webinar. Firstly, just to restate requirements and opportunities around the CA diary. Then to maybe answer ahead and change the functionality. Then I'm going to take you to a live demonstration, show you how you go about creating a new entry and the new functionality, how you would go about modifying an existing entry, which you may have created under the old functionality, and then just briefly touch on the mentor approval process before concluding with support and resources signposting for you. So just to, for those of you that might be new to the CA diary or those that may need a little refresher, do remember the CA diary is a regulatory requirement. It is a requirement of a training contract and of the training regulations that are set by the Institute. So it isn't something that you can put off. Unfortunately, over the last couple of weeks, I've spoken to a number of trainees who did exactly that and are having significant issues trying to prepare for admission to membership. The diary does give you as a trainee an opportunity to demonstrate your professionalism and your compliance with these requirements. So straight away, you're showing your professionalism and that you're able to adhere to the terms of the contract or the requirements that have been set out in your training agreement. The diary is an effective tool for planning and reviewing your progress as you go along. You miss that opportunity if you don't engage with the diary and have regular discussions with your CA diary mentor. But the diary will also show you through the recording and approval process just how you are increasing your skills, your knowledge, your competence, and through doing so, your confidence will in turn take a bit of an uplift as well, and you'll see how you're progressing on a regular basis. So it's a very useful, it's a useful process to engage with and keep engaging with during your training. We do encourage you to stay on track. My colleagues in the training support unit will testify to that where people don't stay on track, they have a mountain to climb at the end, rather than a series of a number of little hills to go over. Gentle slopes, shall we say, rather than a mountain to climb at the end. So we do always encourage trainees to fulfill those requirements and keep yourself right. By the end of your training period, you should hopefully have completed the FAE, including core and the elective, and also have your CA diary completed. What is a completed CA diary? Well, as a lot of people who are applying for a forthcoming admissions to membership deadline will tell you, what you're aiming to get is access to a final mentor review, and the requirements for that are set out in the trainee user guide. But once you've got a final review recorded in your record and you've completed the FAE, you then can apply for admission to membership along with something like 12 or 1300 other people every year. So that's a wonderful accomplishment. So your responsibilities, just to remind you, or if you're new to this, to advise you, we do suggest you record diary entries 1 per month. There might be a slight deviation from that in certain cases, and that could be if you're possibly working an audit and you're working on a long engagement, or you feel you'd prefer to put in a series of diary entries specific to audit engagements. So I'll maybe talk a little bit about that during the demonstration. But 1 diary entry per month, up to a maximum of a 3-month work experience period. So if you want to go at it on a quarterly basis, that's okay, provided you've got sufficient information in. The diary will prompt you to demonstrate your progress on your competencies through each diary entry, and cumulatively you'll see where you're at by the end of your training. Your experience is documented in a structured way. The new enhancements do drive you or direct you through that process, so that's the good news. and it's a little bit different to the previous incarnation of the system. If you are working in a regulated audit environment, it is really important that you ensure that you put in all the required information in your diary entries pertaining to the audit engagement, because you may well be claiming audit days. Statutory audit days will count or can count towards trainees meeting the requirements for a separate qualification, and that is the educational requirements for the audit qualification. So that is a really important area. You do have a responsibility to keep your mentor on track as well. Make sure your reviews are happening every 6 months. And when you're writing up your entries, do not under any circumstances identify any entity or individual or company, etc. In name when you're writing up your competencies, etc. The only thing that I would say there is, if you're on the flexible route, it is useful if you tell us, and maybe in the heading of the diary entry, the entity where you gained the experience. That's the only way we would see entities named as the name of a training entity, and that is okay. So why did we change the CA diary? I suppose there's a continuous quality improvement process that we always adopt within the Institute. Certain drivers led us to this, and one would be our own regulators. We are regulated by the FRC and IASA, and they certainly would take a keen interest in the CA diary construct and the amount of engagement with the diary. Compliance with these regulatory requirements is never far off the table when we're engaging with our regulators. So the regulators would have had a view that the previous incarnation was not actually driving accuracy, specifically in the area of statutory audit engagements. There was a lot of instances of trainees either overstating audit days or understating audit days, each of which can lead to difficulties and challenges. So we were directed by the regulators to come up with a solution for ensuring greater accuracy and on the diary. An enhanced trainee experience is something that I think since the previous incarnation of the diary came into force at the end of April 2017, and we recognised that there were some design shortcomings. So we worked hard, took in a lot of feedback from a lot of different stakeholders, focus groups, etc. And we believe that the current iteration of the diary, which was launched on the 11th of September 2021, we believe that it will provide an enhanced trainee experience, so more efficiency in terms of what you're documenting, your time, etc. We did introduce some features, enhancements for mentors to make the mentor's job easier. So I'll briefly touch on that in the demonstration. But I suppose underpinning all of this, in our experience, a lot of trainees jump in and start recording the experience, don't pay attention to the guidance and think, I've got this, without actually checking it, or somebody told me I should do X or Y or Z, or indeed don't bother doing X, Y or Z, and that actually leads to issues further down the line. And we've unfortunately seen a lot of trainees being delayed and been getting access to membership. And also, as I'd mentioned earlier, the educational requirements for the audit qualification for those that have been admitted to membership is a separate qualification, but nonetheless, if there's insufficient information in the CA diary, then that in itself can lead to delays with any members being awarded the audit qualification. So a lot of good reasons for changing the CA diary functionality. So without further ado, I will hop off of this presentation, and I am going to firstly walk you through a trainee on the CA diary. And of course, we have a lovely timeout feature on our website, which many of you will be familiar with, and that's there for security reasons. But I suppose it is an important thing to bear in mind when you are engaging with the CA diary. So In terms of how you log into the diary, that hasn't changed, as I've just demonstrated. Username, password, which is your student number and your own specific password. Go to the Student Centre and then click on the CA Diary link. So for this demonstration, I'll show you how you go about creating a new diary entry using the new functionality, and then I'm going to backpedal slightly and look at modifications. And I suspect a lot of trainees will have questions around modifying existing entries. Incidentally, there's no changes to the diary dashboard with one minor exception. Trainees who are gaining audit experience in the NI UK area would have previously seen company audit showing up here. Now that has changed to statutory audit, and it just aligns us with the various acts and is more accurate to say statutory audit rather than company audit. So let's, without further ado, go in and create a new CA diary entry. So for the purposes of this one, I should point out that this is a test account that we regularly use for these types of presentations, and the trainee in this instance is a flexible route trainee. So for flexible route trainees, the start and end dates are always going to be blank. If you're in a training contract and you have at least one diary entry saved or submitted, the start date will be pre-populated. So for the purposes of this, I am entering a start and end date for this particular diary entry. So that's the entry in. It's a 1 month entry. And by entering there, the system's calculated 22 work experience days. No changes to these sections at all. If you wanted to add in a public holiday, for example, add it in, and it reduces my work experience days to from 22 to 21. Mandatory fields are always indicated by an asterisk, as we see in this example. And trainees will often say to us, I'm getting an error message at the bottom of the screen. I don't know where I've gone wrong. And as I said to one trainee this morning, go back over your entry, make sure you've completed all these mandatory fields. It's no different to going in and booking a flight or any sort of website purchase, etc. There are certain fields that are required. Overtime is not a field that's required, but for the purposes of this, I'll put in two days. Now, in terms of your title, that can be something, I suppose, that would be indicative rather of the work that was carried out. You can put in entry 1, entry 2, entry 3, or you can put in the dates, but frankly, we would prefer to see a title that would indicate the nature of the work that was undertaken. So to that extent, there are no changes there. Learning levels. Now, again, a lot of trainees, if you've not familiarised yourself with the guidance, would maybe be hazarding a guess at which learning level we should be using. The learning levels have not changed, but what we've done is we've added in level 1, level 2, level 3, just to indicate that usually level 1 is year 1, etc. Now, another handy feature is this tooltip, which explains what the learning levels are, understands, as I said, typically, but not exclusively in year 1, applies as a learning level, usually we'd see around year 2, and then integrate beyond year 2, so year 3 or beyond that. So no changes there, but just maybe some more guidance to help you to navigate your way there. Now, one thing that's missing off of this, for those that were used to the pre-11th of November functionality, there was a huge text box there, which you could pretty much put in as much or as little as you felt was appropriate. That's gone. And we will still see it in any diary entries that are modified, that were created pre the changes. So the diary entry text box, catch-all text box, is gone from any new entries created from the 11th of November onwards. Now, we have a new section here, and again, there's an asterisk, so it is mandatory. During this period, were you engaged in any audit or assurance work, including audit training? Now, for the purposes of this, I'm firstly going to select no. So let's imagine you're training in a finance role, maybe an industry, or a taxation role, or something that's non-audit related. What that does is take you to the next section. non-audit competencies. So if you wanted to claim any audit competencies at all, you'd have to select yes in the above section. Now, what we have here is all the other competency groups. So if I select this drop-down menu, I can see tax, finance, financial reporting, business environment, IT, and professional values. I can select as many or as few of these as I like. I can select all of them if I wish. So if, for example, I wanted to put in financial reporting and taxation, what I do is check the boxes or click on the actual title, make the selections, and then click away on the screen. So click on the main body of the screen, and we can see here taxation and financial reporting have been added into the groups. What that does then is gives you an option to select the relevant elements. So every element from taxation and the financial reporting group are then presented for you in a very similar fashion. So if I selected types of taxation, and let's see, I'll go with TX2, management of client compliance, and then I put in one from the financial reporting group. So that's 3 items that I've checked. I do need to click away off the screen. And incidentally, if you want to modify that in any way, it's fairly straightforward. You can deselect, reselect, select all, check all, whatever you like. So it's a handier way of adding them. In the old system, you'd have had to have added each competency element individually. Now here comes one of the most significant changes for a non-audit entry. I'm just going to click add, and what that does is it adds in these competencies. It's not enough to just have the items selected here. You actually need to add them. So that's where the mandatory aspect of it comes in, firstly. And then secondly, we have types of taxation was one of the competency elements that I had. So this is a box which you can expand, control whatever you like, but it is very important for you to know that there is a maximum character count of 700. So 700 characters is probably a paragraph, and you can't exceed that. We don't necessarily require every trainee to input 700 characters for every competency, but it should be enough information to explain why you've selected that particular competency. Again, it's really important for you to remember there is a session timeout counter here. I'm already 13 minutes, well, 7 minutes into it, but do bear that in mind, because if you're spending a lot of time typing up your narrative here, your clock is counting down and we don't want you losing your work. So if you get to any point and you want to leave it and come back, or you feel you might be about to lose out on your work, click save and exit. So anyway, I had pre-prepared a narrative for this particular one, and the best cooking demonstration fashion. Here's one I prepared earlier. So, and that's something that we would recommend as well. Do keep an offline record of your experience. It's much easier, as you'll see, just to copy and paste into the web page rather than typing that all up from scratch. It can be time consuming. Now that narrative has left me with 9 characters. I think that's more than sufficient. And another point to make is the narrative that I put in, for example, in TX1 may well be sufficient for covering off on another competency element. So it is acceptable to put in CTX1 if you feel your narrative covers off more than one of your competencies. But you do have to have at least something in here, but there should be enough information in your diary to explain why you've claimed or selected those competencies. Again, I'm just going to copy and paste in here for the financial reporting one. Then again, you have an option of removing these competencies. You can add in further ones using the drop downs, you can remove them. You can play around with it till you're satisfied with what you've got. Then the new section, another new section, is reflections on learnings. Again, it's a brief description of what you've learned, and I'm just using that copy and paste just for demonstration for this, but it's something prompted by the 4 points that are there on the screen. So that is in audit entry. No real changes in the time frame section at all. The diary entry section does change because we have the removal of the overarching text box. We have a new section on auditing, and then the competencies are input by multi-select from the groups and multi-select from the elements. Once you've done all of that, nothing has changed here. You're either saving and exiting for further work, or you're submitting it directly to your mentor. So having got halfway through my timer, I'm now going to switch the scenario and turn this into an audit entry. So bear in mind, this is your mandatory field, and if you got to that point and you thought, actually, there is an audit piece that I want to add in, you can just change that over to yes. Now, for our audit trainees out there, this looks different if you've never seen it before. I did mention earlier that we've introduced a lot of features which are there to give accuracy and required information for audit engagements. Not only because we need that for admission to membership purposes, but also for the purposes of reviewing member records for the audit qualification. So do take a lot of care if you're working in the audit space. First new section is sector. Find the sector. Now, you're performing an audit in maybe any one of these types of sectors or entities. Select the one that mirrors it at best. If it doesn't suit you, you want to put in another type of sector, select other, and you have an option to put in a description for another type of sector or entity. Turnover, the entity that you are auditing, what is their turnover in bands of million, and that can be either euro or sterling depending on your jurisdiction. So I'm just going to select one. These are mandatory fields. Job title, were you an audit junior, assistant, an audit in charge or senior, or was there another job title that your organisation uses? And let's use the prompt on screen and put in year 2. So you've given us some really valuable information there. The next section is range of audit experience. Below that, you see record number of statutory audit days, other audit days across both jurisdictions, and then there's client engagement beyond that. But the importance here is this information will cumulatively over the term of the contract drive the educational requirements for the audit qualification. If you've sat and passed the audit elective, you need to have a minimum of 46 weeks in audit. So this becomes very important. So what you have here is a drop-down menu similar to we've seen in the competencies. Select all or select one or more of the relevant categories depending on the nature of the work. Or if you were in training, as the trainee that I spoke to earlier was putting in an entry for, or if it was a different type of assurance engagement, you would select that. If I select assurance engagement and click off the screen, these boxes are still grayed out. And that is because you don't claim any audit days for that type of work. Now, another very useful feature in our view is this tooltip. Now, this is a bit like the learning levels one, but it's an active tooltip. You'll see that there's information there on what counts in terms of the audit days and the ROI legislation. But we do require you to click on the link that's appropriate to you. If it's an ROI audit or an NIUK audit, select a hyperlink and look what happens. We get a document opening up, which you may have seen before, but it's there for you. And again, if you're working with dual monitors, why not drag this over onto your other monitor, review it while you're inputting your diary entry. So they do open up in separate tabs. Similarly, with the NIUK guidance, we would require that you would review that before documenting any audit diary entry. And this guidance will periodically be updated, and it is available on the CA Diary resources page. Now, just go back to the point in hand. If I've decided that actually the engagement I was working on does fit under, let's say, the NI statutory audit definitions. If that was the case, I'm actually just going to deselect the assurance engagement and I'm going to put in statutory audit NI UK. So again, make your selection as appropriate and then click off there onto any part of the screen. and that registers. Now look what's happened here. The number of statutory audit days for NI UK, that field has opened up. Okay, bear in mind we've got 21 days in this diary entry and 2 overtime days, so maximum, an upper limit of 23 days. I'm just going to put in 23 days for the purposes of this demonstration. Again, this has nothing to do with admission to membership requirements. It's purposely for the audit qualification requirements. So what I've in this entry is 23 work experience days effectively, because the 2 overtime days are added, and I've also got 23 audit days. The client engagement number field is not mandatory. Your firm may direct you to put that in, or they may not. If they're not directing you to do it, I wouldn't worry about it. Now, I've got 5 minutes left in this demonstration for creating an entry, or else I'll need to save my work and come back to it. But if I was changing this, as I said earlier, to an audit engagement, again, the same principle with the competencies drop-down applies. So I'm going to put in AU1 in this case. I'm going to add that in. So again, I would suggest that you have something prepared offline, maybe in a Word document, and you can just drop that in by copying and pasting. Exact same principle will apply. 700 characters of a maximum character count. They're a bit like the Twitter character countdown if you're used to that platform. So a minimum of 1 competency element from either auditing or the auditing other group is mandatory for any audit diary entries. So once I've got at least 1 in from any area, then that is satisfactory. Typically you would have more than 1, but for this experience here, I'm just going to put in the 1. Now do bear in mind, audit diary entry, you've clicked yes, you've populated all those mandatories, and you've got at least 1 audit competency. You do still need to have at least 1 non-audit competency. I spoke to somebody in a call last week and they were getting stuck because they hadn't put in any non-audit competencies. I would argue that 99 times out of 100, possibly 100 out of 100, you will certainly be able to claim at least 1 element from any of these groups: member professional values, business environment, non-technical areas. So in this case, we already had a description from the earlier part of the demonstration. So I'm really getting ready now to save or submit. I've got 3 minutes left. I've got my information in. There's no changes, as I said, to the time frame section. All applies as the same. The diary entry section now only has the title or the learning level, and we have a understand, apply, and integrate tooltip to help you navigate your way through that. Then we have a choice that you need to make, and if you're in an audit training, yes, you'll be selecting yes. But put in all the relevant fields specific to the engagement that you're recording, and then any as appropriate, but do not forget to review the relevant guidance as we've seen here. For this one, just say that I am going to save it for further work, and there's a message comes up here on screen. You've entered at least 1 audit competency. Are you satisfied with the accuracy of recorded audit days, as it may impact on the educational requirements for the audit qualification? If I wanted to go back and recheck my work, I'd select no. In this case, I am going to select yes. So what would happen in the contract scenario is that the next diary entry start date would be calculated there. But as I said earlier, this is a flexible route trainee, so therefore that doesn't apply. Now, if I wanted to go back and modify that diary entry, here's a little tool tip, handy tip for you. This banner up here, you can click on any of the values and it will filter in that order. So if I click on start date, it's got the earliest down to the most recent, and the one that I've just newly created is editable. There's no changes there in terms of diary entries that are submitted to Mentor or unlocked or with student are, as you can see, editable. Anything that is locked is view only. If you need access to any of those, you need to speak to your mentor or training support and get it unlocked. But I'm going to edit this diary entry that I've just put in, and I am going to, let's see, I'm going to make a change to the number of statutory audit days, because actually I realised that I was out in training one of the days, so it wasn't 23 days, it was actually 22 days statutory audit. I am also going to add in a further competency element. So add, again, mandatory that there's something in the text box, and all the other mandatory fields they were before. So I'm now going to submit this to the mentor, and I'm going to click yes because I'm satisfied that everything is accurate. So that diary entry has now been submitted to the mentor. Do bear in mind, I do have access to edit it with a submitted to mentor status. The only way I don't is if the entry status is locked, and that can be unlocked if you need to do some further work on it. Okay, so that's how to create a new diary entry, how to edit that entry using the new functionality. A lot of our trainees will be querying or concerned about how do they go about making changes to entries that were created in the pre-11th of November functionality. Now, what I would say there is if you want to make any changes to any diary entries after the 11th of November, you will have to populate all those new mandatory fields. Any diary entry status locked and that you and your mentor are satisfied with them as they are, you don't need to make any changes to them at all. If you have a number of diary entries with a status of submitted to mentor using the old functionality, you are not required to go in and make changes to include those new fields. But if you wanted to make a change to any of those diary entries at all, so take this one for example, and it is a test entry, so the information is not what you would be seeing in practice. But if you wanted to make any changes to this diary entry, to the dates, to any of those pieces of information in the time frame section, overtime, etc., accounts prep, tax computations, training. If I just wanted to even record an updated description on this, you can see there we've been using this as a test account, but I'm going to get a message there asking me about the formatting, and that's fine. But if I make a change, even a one-word change to my description and a submitted entry that was used under the old, it's a pre-11 diary entry. If I make one change, I am then subject to completing all of these fields. If I don't do that and I go save and exit, I'm getting all the red lines to tell me that I need to complete all these. So that's an important point to note. And you just need to make sure that if you're making any changes that you're fulfilling the requirements of those new fields. So if I missed any of these, for example, I'm going to get that error message. And I'm just selecting random values here for the purpose of the demonstration. So any changes that was created pre-11th of November 21, you need to populate the mandatory fields. I don't think it's going to take you that long to do it. Now, what I would say is, because you've got that information, now let's just imagine you had a really good description in the old format. We don't require that you go and start writing up a new description. So it is satisfactory to do just this. And this is explained in the trainee user guide. See description above. An option of putting supplementary information in. If you don't want to, that's fine. You don't have to go and retype everything again. And if you're adding in new competencies, that's okay. You have the option of putting information in, but you don't have to. What you do have to do is make sure you've completed all the mandatory fields. And you can still edit, demonstrated here. You can still make edits here. You can put in additional information. You can change your dates, but do make sure that you're covering off all of the mandatory fields. A lot of people get nervous about this, but if you've got a decent narrative written up here, then it's actually straightforward just to refer above. Same principle applies. I'm going to submit to mentor. Same message because it's an audit entry. And off we go. That diary entry is now been It's taken from the old format, and it's been presented really in a hybrid format with the new functionality. And I've now gone ahead and submitted that to my mentor. And I could still go in and edit it again, but I won't do that for now. So that really concludes the demonstration on the trainee side. Suffice to say, and it is worth restating, there is a significant amount of resource material available to you. We've seen how to access the audit guidance, but if you're not aware of it already, do select CA Diary Guidelines from your dashboard. It takes loads of information for general trainees and mentors, specific information for audit trainees. Then we've got some lovely little recordings, on-screen demonstrations, and we'll put up recordings such as this. We will be expanding the guides. We will be, within the next week, I would imagine, posting up a sample entries document to give you an indication of how to write these things up. But it is very important before you do anything on a diary that you take the time to review the resources and really be sure what you're doing, especially, but not exclusively, for those who are recording audit experience. So that's the trainee side of things. Very briefly, just to show you some of the changes that we have made to the mentor functionality. Again, just using a test account, and we'll move to answering some questions after this. So log in, mentors will log in, no changes, that's done. Trainees' diary entries are submitted for review here. They click on the number of entries, brings them to this page. So if you submitted 10 entries to your mentor, they'll be displayed here, but it'll be over 2 pages because there's a maximum of 6 per one page. Now, mentors previously would have been going in to each entry, clicking the title, opening up all these collapsible banners. Now, we're very little in this one. Again, it's a test entry. But you can see there that the mentor had a number of clicks to get to before they found out the information that they wanted. So what I would say, when you're speaking to your mentor, do let him or her know that actually the way to do this now is to actually click on here, click the CA Diary report. Now, there's a little teething problem with this report at this current point when I'm recording this, so the report won't generate properly for me. That'll be ironed out very shortly. But it's really click there, generate the CA Diary PDF report, and review the presented information for all submitted entries. And then, if they're satisfied, they can select all, or they can select them individually, click lock and approve. And there's a little declaration. It's really about increased accountability for mentors. They're stating that they've carefully reviewed the diary entries submitted by the trainee. It's an accurate record of experience, competencies, learning outcomes, and audit days, if applicable, during the period. And the mentor simply clicks the checkbox and clicks approve. And that really locks and approves all those entries. So all of those days, all of those competencies will now be updated on the trainee dashboard. So do remember that dashboard only reflects locked diary entries. So that's pretty much all I had for you in terms of the demonstration. We have loads of resources that I've shown you on the screen, and we've got the staff there. We're more than happy to assist you where we can if there's any questions or gaps in your knowledge. So I'm going to invite Nicola to let me know if I've got any questions that we need to resolve.
Hi Hugh, thanks for that. We've 2 main themes of questions coming up. The first one regarding the new system when recording competencies. If a trainee feels that the same narrative covers off 2 or 3 competencies, how should they
approach that? I just lost you there, Nicola, but I got the gist of that. So the way that that's done is you can type up your narrative in one of the competency elements and one of the text boxes. And if you feel that it actually does cover more than one, you can just simply put in, as I did in the demonstration, C, whatever competency element it is. So in that case, I think it was CTX1. So you can do that for auditing competencies and for non-auditing competencies. Obviously, there needs to be enough information there to support your rationale for claiming those competencies. So just make sure that you've covered off what you need to be covering off. But that is an acceptable approach. You don't have to have a separate narrative for every competency element that you've recorded. Just be careful that you don't go down the road of C above for everything, because 700 characters would not cover, multiple audit and non-audit diary entries. Do make sure you're capturing the essence of what you've done. Are you hearing me okay, Nicola? Hello?
Hello, sorry, can you hear me? My internet
Yeah.
dropped.
Yeah, I thought I'd lost you there, Nicola. Yeah, so hopefully that answers the question. Is there any other questions coming up?
Sorry, did you answer the query
Yeah,
on?
I just covered that off there, yeah.
Perfect. And then the other one was around new trainees who have just joined, when they'll get access to the diary and what they should do at this stage of the year.
Yeah, I'm encouraged to hear that people are asking already. So basically, there's two things need to happen. The training contracts should have been submitted by the training firm by now. Those contracts will be with our colleagues in the student admissions department. Now, as you can imagine, there's a huge volume of them. So they're working through and approving those and registering those contracts. And it does take a little bit of time. So for most trainees, you'll probably find it will be into the new year before your contract is approved, and your training firm should be notified when that does happen. Once the contract has been approved, you then need to have a mentor assigned. So if you're in a bigger training organisation, they will know how to do that. So contact your HR, your education team, professional development team, etc., and explain that you need to have a mentor assigned. Training support will assist with the assignment of mentors for larger firms and for smaller firms. So any questions around mentor assignment, we'd be happy to deal with those. So once the contract or the flexible route registration has been approved and a mentor assigned, you can fire away and start to record your experience. I would suggest that you keep an offline backup just now. As I said earlier, use a Word document, etc. Write it up just now, and then it makes it so much easier when you're just copying and pasting and lifting it over into the live diary. So don't get caught out with having a huge backlog to go in and update.
Great. Just another query here around the requirement for audit days for membership. This person might be getting a bit confused between the experience days and the audit days requirements.
Yeah. So there's no requirement whatsoever to have audit days for admission to membership. A lot of our trainees are not working in anything related to audit. So it's not audit days that count for admission to membership. It's relevant work experience days. Now, a lot of our trainees, most of them in fact, are working in audit, but it's relevant experience days gained throughout the contract. Typically, if you're on a training contract of a 3.5-year duration, your requirement is, your target number of days is 682. There is a bit of flexibility in that. So if, for example, during your contract you were furloughed, laid off, etc., there is flexibility. So anything from 637 or above will give you a sufficient number of days. 682 is a target, 637 or above. And do remember, overtime counts. I did mention the audit qualification. So audit days don't count. It's not audit days that count for membership. They do count for the audit qualification, and cumulatively over the term of the training period, it's 46 weeks is the minimum requirement there for audit experience.
Perfect. That seems to be everything that's come in so far.
Okay, final call for questions before we wrap it up. Just to say, while you're having a think about that, I will be making some slight edits to this recording and putting it onto the CA Diary resources page. So please feel free to share the word with your colleagues. Do make use of the resources that are there. We hope that you have the same experience, and the feedback that we are getting is that the new enhancements do make the job easier for trainees when recording it. So we hope that that is your experience.
Great. One last question there, Hugh, is if I'm meeting the same competencies with most jobs, do I need to keep inputting the competencies each time, or do I only need to hit each once?
The minimum requirement is to hit your competencies by the end of your training, to hit all of those competencies at the integrate level. That is to say, your core areas, financial reporting, professional values, business environment, all at least once at the integrate level. Not understand and apply and integrate, but also in the technical area, either audit and tax, finance, or IT. Personally speaking, if I was gaining the same competencies, I would tend to just put them in, because it's a full representation of the work that was completed. But you don't have to keep repeating them. And I do realise that trainees that are working in industry or a finance role will have multiple, recurring tasks. So that does happen. But I would suggest put them in to give up you and your mentor full oversight and credit for the work that's been carried out during the period. That would be my recommendation.
Great stuff. There was a few other queries earlier just for people, I suppose, around audit and what qualifies as statutory audit and what doesn't. In those situations, I suppose we'd be directing people to the guide to audit days. And then if you do have any queries, have a conversation with your mentor or audit partner, and they should be able to advise you on that.
Yeah, absolutely, Nicola. You nailed it in the head. The guidance is there. Training support unit, we're not the experts in auditing, but the guidance is very detailed and robust, and it is refreshed on a regular basis. But if you're not sure about the nature of the audit that you're working in, where does it fit in terms of statutory or other or none, indeed, you just should have that conversation with your mentor or with your manager. So you're spot on there, Nicola.